All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to be talking about Chapter 18, Section 2. This is the Crusades. I want you to listen to this video and then you'll take a quiz over this section. So over here we have our main ideas. The Pope called on Crusaders to invade the Holy Land, so we'll kind of talk about why he might have done that. We're going to see, despite some initial success, the later Crusades failed. And then last but not least, the Crusades changed Europe forever. And we'll kind of end with that as what was the impact of the Crusades and why did they fail, things like that. Now, the Crusades, what it is the Crusades is a long series of war between Christians, mainly from Europe, and the Muslims. So think back to the Islamic empires that we talked about before Christmas break and how they came out of Saudi Arabia and then started spreading around the Middle East and North Africa, even into Europe. So in that Middle East there's also Jerusalem, and that was considered the Holy Land or Palestine. And this is the place where Jesus had lived, preached, and died. Well, there's three major religions that consider that the Holy Land. One being the Christians with Jesus, another one being the Jews. They see that as their promised land when Moses led the slaves out of Egypt. And then, of course, the Muslims. They believe that that's where Muhammad ascended into heaven, is when he was in Jerusalem. So all three religions considered it holy. Now, for the causes of the Crusades, there could be many, many different causes for the Crusades. It could be for religious purposes, it could be racism or culturalism and things like that also. But what the textbook talks about is that around the late 1000s, some Turkish Muslims took over this area known as Jerusalem. Now, before the Turkish Muslims took it over, Christians and Muslims and Jews all kind of lived peacefully. Christians and Jews could come into Jerusalem all they wanted to, practice their religion and things like that. There was really no penalty for that. Well, the Turks came in there and they actually started, let's say, requiring Christians and Jews to pay a certain tax just to come in there and practice their religion. And this was really bad for the Christians and the Jews. Also, the Turks were threatening to attack and sometimes would attack some of those Christians and Jews that came in there. So eventually what ends up happening is that actually some of the Eastern Orthodox Christians, if you can remember the last section where we talked about that split in the church, the Eastern Orthodox and the Roman Catholics, well, actually, some of those bishops in Constantinople of the Eastern Orthodox, they pleaded to the Pope in Rome to come help them. And the Pope saw this as an opportunity for the Roman Catholics and for the Pope himself to spread his authority. If he came and helped those Eastern Orthodox, maybe they would come back and see the Pope as being all-powerful. So the Pope agreed to the request. And what happens is Pope Urban at this time, he's going to call on all Christians from Europe to go capture the Holy Land from the Muslim Turks. And he's challenging the European kings and nobles to quit the fighting in Europe and take the fight to an outside enemy. And he kind of sees, the Pope sees this as maybe more stability in Europe now too. Instead of each of us fighting with each other, we will go off and fight this common enemy known as the Muslims. Now, what happens to Crusaders? They're going to sew crosses onto their clothing, and this shows that they're fighting for God, and that's kind of where the word crusade comes from. It's Latin for marked with a cross and things like that. Crusaders believe that they're doing God's will, and that's going to inspire many of them to take on this challenge. There's many other reasons that Christians are going to go fight over in the Holy Lands other than just for God. Some do it for adventure. Others are thinking, hey, if I go over there, maybe I can get some land and treasure out of it, excitement, things like that. So it wasn't only for the religious purpose of God that crusaders and knights and nobles and kings went off to fight. They did it for other reasons also. The land and treasure, and really adventure is probably one of the biggest reasons why they do it. Now the First Crusade is going to come around 1096. The very beginning of the First Crusade is actually led by peasants. You're going to have this guy named Peter the Hermit is actually going to lead some peasants on the very beginning of the First Crusade. They kind of went out before the knights and all that got ready to go, and they got slaughtered. Now, eventually, the knights themselves will end up going to Jerusalem. They will defeat the Muslims in the First Crusade. They will fare a lot better than Peter the Hermit and the peasants did. And by the end of the First Crusades, roughly 1099, Jerusalem has been recaptured, I guess, for the Christians. And what happens now is the Christians are going to set up 4 kingdoms around Palestine or this Holy Land and claim that as their own. And then they're going to allow people to come into those kingdoms and trade. They're going to allow people back into Europe, trading with Europe and things like that. So you can kind of see right over in here, this is the Holy Land right here that we're talking about. Now, there's going to be a Second Crusade. Now, the 4 kingdoms actually will last for about 80 to 90 years. Eventually, the Muslims are going to come back. They're going to regroup, and they're going to want to reclaim the Holy Land again for themselves. And there will be a Second Crusade after the Muslims take it over. The Second Crusade kind of ends pretty poorly, a lot of poor planning, heavy losses as the Christians are trying to get to the Holy Land. They don't even reach the Holy Land. Many of them will die on the journey there, maybe out in the Mediterranean Sea or even on land. And then you have the Third Crusade. And this is kind of one of the most famous of the Crusades because this was the crusade where the rulers of England, France, and the Holy Roman Empire are going to lead their armies to the Holy Land. But pretty soon the German king's going to die, the French king leaves, and that only leaves King Richard I, also known as Richard the Lionhearted, to lead the Christian Crusaders. And he's going to be going up against the Muslim leader, Saladin. Now, Saladin from L to J is the Muslim leader that was very well respected even by the Europeans for how well he organized and led his army and how he treated even the fallen enemy. But what happens is Richard and Saladin, they respect each other so much that, yeah, they're fighting against each other, but they also negotiate for a peaceful end to this. What ends up happening is the Christians don't recapture the Holy Land, but through the negotiations with Richard and Saladin is that Christians are now allowed to come into the Holy Land and they will be protected. They're not going to be persecuted if they come into Jerusalem and things like that. But the Third Crusade ends with Jerusalem still in the hands of the Muslim Empire. You're going to have a series now of maybe a Fourth Crusade. It doesn't go very well. Really, they don't even go to the Holy Land. They end up, going to, I believe, into Italy, and they attack an Italian rival and things like that. They're going to actually attack the Jews in Constantinople and things like that. And then you have a series of other crusades, but by the end, let's say getting close to 1300s, the Muslim Empire still controls the Holy Land, and that's pretty much the end of the Crusades. The First Crusade is successful for the Christians. Other than that, the other Crusades end poorly for the Christians. And you have some reasons why it ended poorly. Crusaders had to travel long distances. This right here, the Holy Land, is pretty close to where the Muslim, if not in the Muslim Empire. Crusaders weren't prepared to fight. They weren't very good. The climate over in Europe is a lot different than it is here in the Holy Land. The Holy Land is a lot of desert climate. The Crusaders weren't prepared for that type of weather. The Christians are going to be certainly outnumbered by the Muslim forces, and then Christian leaders themselves weren't very good. Yes, King Richard was a good leader, but Peter the Hermit was not. You had so many other leaders of the Christians throughout the 7 or 8 Crusades. They were very poor leaders, and with poor leadership, you usually are going to fail in those crusades. But the Crusades did have an impact. They did have an impact on not only the Holy Land, this area here, but they have a huge impact on Europe as this Middle Ages, because these Crusades are occurring during what historians term as the High Middle Ages. Well, what's going to happen is with all these people coming from Europe, and we're talking hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that will come from Europe over to the Holy Lands for the fighting, well, they're going to go back to Europe. But it's what they bring back with them to Europe that is so important. They're going to bring back new ideas. They're going to bring back trade. They're going to start setting up cities. They're going to demand, over here the knights are going to demand money instead of land to be paid for their service and things like that. So there is a lot of things that are going to come out of the Crusades that are not only just bad because there's millions of people that are going to be killed, but there are some good things for Europe and the rest of the world that will occur because of the Crusades, and it will help this area here in Europe actually get out of the Middle Ages and lead us on to the next part that is going to be known as the Renaissance. All right, so after listening to this, I want you guys to go ahead and take the 18.2 quiz. Thank you.